This town is so much stranger than anybody ever tells you. It's this town called Fire Island. It's a short ferry ride away, right off the coast of Long Island, New York. And I am absolutely positive that everybody that I talked to about this place before visiting lied directly to my face. All they talk about is the beautiful beaches, the ocean views, the nightlife. They'll tell you that Fire Island is such a blast, but they always leave out the dark underbelly of that town. There is something seriously wrong about that place, and we had no idea how strange and evil it was until we got there. If you've never been to Fire Island, let me explain it to you really quick. It's this narrow strip of land off of the coast of Long Island. You get there by a ferry, and then once you're on the island, it's just boardwalks, bikes, beach houses, and bars, and there are no cars on the entire island. There's not many cops, at least not in the way that you would expect. During the day when you're walking around, it feels like a beach town from a postcard. But at night, it gets very weird, especially if you're not a local. So when I turned 21, I finally got invited on this big Fire Island trip that my cousin would take every year. So me and my cousin Mikey were super close. We really love spending time with each other. We really love going on trips together. And his extended friends had this yearly trip that they would always book that seemed like the most fun. They would all pitch in on a big house on Fire Island for an entire week. And this was the first year that I was able to go because I was finally of age. They didn't want anybody younger than 21 because it would just be this whole issue getting into bars and things of that nature. So once I turned 21, he was like, dude, you can finally come. I'm so excited to share this experience with you. So right when I got the green light that I was allowed to go, I sent the funds over, I booked the tickets, I flew into JFK, I took the Long Island Railroad to Sayville, and I met up with my cousin Mikey right where the ferry picks us up. So for this story to make sense, you have to understand the dynamic of this group and this vacation. There was about 15 people staying at this house. We all pitched in a couple $100s for a bed in this place, but we weren't all obligated to hang out with each other all the time. It's not like it was Mikey's group of close friends where everybody was supposed to be doing every single thing together on a strict itinerary. Everybody knew each other, there were mutuals, there were acquaintances, but this trip was more about people on a budget being able to afford spending a week at Fire Island. Everybody was cordial, everybody liked each other, but we weren't pressuring each other to do everything together. And there were small cliques of different people, like me and Mikey were a clique, just 2 people. Some of the cliques were 3 and 4 people, but everybody had their own itinerary in mind. They all had a different vision of what they were going to do with the week. Not that we didn't all like each other, and not that we wouldn't spend time together at certain moments. It was more that everybody's allowed to do their own thing. And I needed to say that so you understand why we were isolated so much of the time during this story. And so it makes sense why we were taking the ferry by ourselves. Everybody else was already at the house. We were the last ones to arrive because Mikey was waiting for me to fly in. So anyway, I get to the dock where the ferry is and there's a nice restaurant. Mikey shows up. We have about 20 minutes until we get to the ferry. We're eating calamari and clams on the half shell at this awesome little bayside restaurant. And eventually the ferry gets there and it starts to deboard. And the feeling of the vacation starts to rise when you know that you're going to be getting there soon. We're cracking jokes, we're smiling, we're having a great time. And then the people that are leaving Fire Island start deboarding the ferry. And this might sound kind of backwards, but the people that were coming off this ferry, it kind of excited us because of how bad they looked. Everybody that was getting off that thing looked beat up, hungover, like they were battling the worst Sunday scaries they had ever experienced. But for us, we saw that as a good sign because we were like, all of these people had a fantastic time this week, but they all looked like they were paying the price today. So we knew based on their energy and how beat down they looked that we were in for a very good time this week. At least that's what we thought until we got on the ferry. Because we realized once we sat down and we were headed towards Fire Island, the workers on the ferry also had a weird feel about them. They weren't as beat up or hungover as the passengers that we saw get off, but they had a similar level of paranoia to them. They weren't simply acting like they were at work. There was something else, like an underlying feeling that all of the staff members were sharing, and I could see them shooting looks at each other and whispering to each other about something that had been going on. And all of the other people on the ferry are just getting ready for a vacation. They're not noticing this, but Mikey did, and I definitely did. So Mikey nudges me and he's like, are you seeing this? Like, what are these girls whispering about? And why are the luggage guys looking overboard? And I'm like, dude, you noticed that too? And then we started talking about it and we're like, it doesn't really make sense because this is peak vacation time. The water is totally calm. The weather is absolutely beautiful, but they're acting like something is wrong here. Not exactly like we're in danger, but as if there's something that the passengers don't know. And all of the workers are peeking their heads overboard, looking down into the water. Some of them are even putting on binoculars and looking up into the sky as if they're looking around the area for danger. Mikey even cracked a joke like, what are we, off the coast of Somalia? Like, who's the captain now? These people are acting like pirates are about to board this ship any minute. So we're sitting on the interior of this ferry. You could sit on the upper deck and enjoy the ocean breeze, but it's a bit quieter inside of the ferry, and we didn't really care where we sat. So we gave the families the good seating, and we sat inside near the garbage can and the luggage. But this also meant that we were sitting very close to where all of the employees congregated. Imagine you're sitting very close to where like the flight attendants sit. When the employees don't have a main objective that they need to accomplish, they need to be standing or sitting somewhere. And they happened to be all sitting very close to us. So we were able to overhear some of the things that they were saying, but they were intentionally whispering, like we really had to eavesdrop to even get an ounce of information about it. And we got bits and pieces of information. I heard a couple things, Mikey heard a couple things. One of the things that I heard was, one of the girls said, and I quote, "I don't know why we're still shuttling them in." And I heard that clear as day. And Mikey heard another one of them say, "We're seeing them everywhere." And I don't know how correlated those two statements were, but clearly they were on the lookout for something and they weren't understanding why the ferry company was still bringing people to Fire Island. And the cherry on top of this eavesdropping conversation was a third person saying, they don't care, it's all about money. As if the company was aware of something that was going on, but they didn't care because it was peak vacation season, so they're gonna shuttle in as many people as they can. So in that moment, as Mikey and I are brainstorming, like what could they possibly be talking about? Because we know they're not talking about Somali pirates. We come to the conclusion that they're probably talking about shark sightings. We're not experts on shark migration schedules, but filling in the gaps of what they were talking about in the inflections that they were talking about it, we're like, maybe they're seeing like great white sharks that are migrating, and these people are confused as to why we're bringing in people to an island with shark infested waters. And anybody that lives there knows that sharks aren't like a major issue at Fire Island. Obviously there's sightings just like any other beach, but the way that they were talking about it was like that there was a major issue going on. But me and Mikey didn't care. We're scared of the ocean either way. If there's a shark in there or not, we're not going any deeper than waist deep. So it didn't affect us whatsoever. So our energy was still through the roof. What they were talking about, it didn't affect our mentality about this vacation. So we eventually make it across the bay. The ferry pulls up at the Ocean Beach dock. We grab our luggage and we take about a 5-minute walk to the rental house. So very quickly, there are two sides to Fire Island. There's the side that is along the ocean, so you would get like an oceanfront property, and then there's the side that runs along the bay, Great South Bay if I'm being exact. And obviously you could rent a house in the middle of the island, but whoever booked this house that we were renting chose a house on the bay side of the island, so we were as far away from the beach as you technically could be. So the front door of our rental property faced towards the bay, and there's like a main street that runs along the bay side of the island. So we get off this ferry, we take an immediate left, 5 minutes later we are at this house. That is how close we are to town. I should also explain the very unique design of Fire Island because it's not normal. The way the architecture and foot traffic is set up is very unique to that place in general. It's on a perfect little grid, which is not uncommon, but the way the beach houses are built, they're almost like on top of each other. And the way the grid is set up is actually very convenient for what the town is for. It's for foot traffic, it's for a beach town. It's very narrow paths that are only meant for walking in flip-flops, maybe dragging a wagon or riding a bike. And the horizontal paths that go the length of the island, and like I said, it is on a grid, so the horizontal roads will get you all the way across town, but the vertical roads will get you directly to the beach. You could walk straight from the bay all the way to the beach in a straight line, and there's absolutely no vehicles anywhere. The biggest vehicle that you're going to see is maybe a cop on an ATV or a golf cart. And since there's no major vehicles, it gives it this quiet, calm, lovely vibe to it. And even though all of the houses are cramped and on top of each other and super weathered, you still feel like you have privacy because it's not like there's traffic right out of your front door. And the way the houses are built, it's like the perfect ambiance for a beach town. So it doesn't feel too cramped. You feel like it's exactly what it should be. So anyway, we get to this place. We're the last people there. All other 13 to 15 people are already having a good time. They're pre-gaming, and we just say what's up to everybody and we settle in. And like I said, everybody is in their own cliques. So yes, you could combine an excursion and go with another clique somewhere, but we were looking to have fun by ourselves. And so were most of the other people, especially on the first day there. So you understand why me and Mikey were alone. We all settled in, we all chose what beds we were sleeping in, and then we all went our separate ways. Mikey and I want to have a full-blown beach day. We head right there. We have a super fun day filled with spike ball, beach football, tanning, a little bit of ocean, waist deep, but we're on our own time. Eventually, it gets late, we're tired, especially from our travels. Especially me, because I flew in. So we head back to the beach house, and a lot of the other guys weren't as tired as we were, and they went out. But we were settling in for the night. We had a quick dinner, and then we were just lounging around the house. So once it starts to get later on the island and the sun really goes down, the rowdiness and the foot traffic tends to be much more prominent near the town center, much less near the residential area. So it starts to get quiet, and you see much less people walking by. You could hear the rowdiness in the distance at the bars and the restaurants, but it's pretty dark and quiet if you decide to settle in. So we're just hanging out on the outdoor deck, digesting a little bit before we headed off to sleep. And it's completely quiet near us. So anybody that's approaching, we would be able to hear it and be able to see where it was coming from. And the house that we rented had a dual level deck, and we were on the top one. So we had a high vantage point overlooking the entire area. Like, we were able to see the narrow pathway going vertically towards the ocean and the horizontal one going towards town. And we were able to see pretty far, like into backyards, just taking in the entire ambiance and landscape of this beautiful island. And I'm relaxing, kicking back, looking into the beautiful night sky when something catches my eye. And the only way I could explain it is that it looked like a floating patch of a heat wave. Like, I could tell that something was there. And whatever it was causing some type of distortion, as if it was like a ripple in the air. And it was moving from the right of my eyesight towards the left very slowly. I couldn't tell how far away it was, like the depth perception on it. I didn't have a good gauge of it, but I could tell that it was about 100 feet in the air. But it didn't look like it was getting any further from us or any closer to us. It was just moving horizontally from my right to my left. And I tapped Mikey's shoulder, getting his attention, and I'm like really directing his attention into the exact right spot. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to spot it. It is like a very, very subtle distortion. But eventually he sees it and he's like, dude, what is that? And I'm like, is that some type of blimp? We have no idea what we're looking at, but we both see this warped, odd thing floating across our line of sight. And then as we're staring at it, we hear this odd sound. And at first, we don't know if it's coming from that thing, but we're able to see something else from the corner of our vision, now coming from our left, and we're like, that's definitely the source of the sound. And it's this weird, croaky, sing-songy jingle. Initially, this kind of jump scared us because we didn't know what it was. But once we looked into that direction, we saw that it was just a girl probably in her early 20s, a little bit tipsy, riding a bicycle towards town. And this girl seemed to be having the time of her life, and the sound that was coming out of her was her singing. She was laughing and singing the Krusty Krab pizza song while riding a bike towards town, which I could only assume she was going to get a slice of pizza. But then we turn our attention back towards this floating distortion, which now seems to be right above her, because it was coming from the right going to the left, and she was coming from the left going to the right, and now it was almost directly hovering above her, and she was nearing the intersection of the grid, and she's riding it horizontally, but right when she got under it, she abruptly stopped singing, and she was right at that intersection, and she ripped her bike to the left, stood up on the pedals, and started hauling ass towards the ocean on one of the vertical pathways. It wasn't that she was screaming or panicking. She abruptly stopped singing, and that's what gave the situation a level of tension that started to scare us. So I look at Mikey, and he saw what I saw. She clearly reacted to the distortion. So we jump up out of our seats and we go to the ledge of this deck so we could get a better angle at where she's going. And we're looking back and forth between her and this distortion, and it doesn't look as if whatever this is following her. It looks like it's staying in the same place, but she is not slowing down. She looks like she's fleeing from this thing, but we didn't see her look up at it. That was the weird thing. She abruptly turned, stood up, and started pedaling towards the ocean. And with the aggression that she was putting into her pedaling, we were kind of hyper fixated on her because we're like, is she gonna turn? We could see almost all the way to the ocean. So she's just flying down this vertical pathway, not turning left or right. And we spent a little too much time looking at her because when we looked back at the distortion, it wasn't there anymore. And anybody knows that has been to Fire Island, if you're on one of those pathways and you look straight down, you could pretty much see all the way across the island. Obviously, if they get close to the beach, they become like a little speck, but you could borderline see like the little wooden bridge that takes you from the island to the beach, all the way from the bay if you look hard enough. And we knew that, and we didn't have the best angle from the deck, so we climb down the deck, we go to the pathway, and we see this girl, the little blip that's left of her, still flying down towards the beach, all the way to the wooden bridge that gets you to the beach. It looked as if she had went all the way there and rode the bike all the way onto the sand, but then once she was over that hump, you couldn't see her anymore. We couldn't see any movement, even if it was a little tic-tac in the distance. And once she was gone and everything seemed calm, I felt a little bit uneasy, and I didn't realize why until Mikey said, "Did you see where that thing went?" And I realized that that's what was making me unsettled, that I didn't know where it went, and we had left the safety of the home, and now we were on this pathway only about 50 feet from where she saw it, and she thought it was scary enough to turn and flee towards the ocean. We had instinctively got to the pathway to get a better view at her, but now that we were on the pathway, we knew that we were not in the right place. So we fled right back to the house. And we had no other choice but to call it a night. It's not like we saw an assault or anything like that. It was late, we were tired, nothing really happened, but we woke up to something devastating. We woke up in a packed house, sleeping on some day beds filled with a bunch of hungover dudes. But everybody was on vacation, they were having a good time, we smelled coffee brewing, food was being made, and before you know it, we were showered and we were ready for the day, getting some fresh air out front of the house. But once we stepped outside, we realized that there was a commotion going on right by our house, right in the bay. We thought it was just a bustling morning at first, but as we were catching people's facial expressions walking by, we could tell that there was something very off. And we knew something went wrong when we saw their ambulance-style vehicles going towards the basin nearby. And we could see that cops were congregating, and once we got out to the main street and we looked to the right towards this little basin, we could clearly see that there was some sort of crime scene going on, and all of the locals were flocking. We started to get closer and we start hearing small whispers, and the whispers are telling us that somebody was found in the basin. And as we get closer and closer, we start hearing people frantically crying, and we could see that there's clearly friends identifying who is in the basin. And there might be family members, but whoever is close to this situation is very close to the crime scene, and all of the other residents or tourists or whoever isn't directly attached to this is kind of gossiping on the outskirts of it. And this basin, I'm calling it a basin, but it's much more of like a little marina where people store their little boats during the winter probably. It's behind the wall of the bay, so there's no tide whatsoever, the water's pretty shallow. There's no way that anybody would drown in there. In fact, it would probably be kind of hard to drown in. There's ladders on the edge, you could probably climb out of this thing pretty effortlessly, and in some parts of it, your feet could probably touch the ground. So the whispers that were going on around this little crime scene are that somebody must have fallen into the water, like they got too drunk, they partied too hard, and they slipped into the basin. That was the ongoing narrative. There weren't any rumors of foul play. It seemed as if everybody was like, yeah, I mean, things like this kind of happen sometimes. It's a party town. What a tragedy, but that seems like what this is. But eventually, as too many people are coming near it, the people that are working there, the EMTs, The police officers, the family and friends, they don't want everybody surrounding it, and they ask everybody to please disperse out of respect for the loved ones and just so they could handle the situation professionally. So we have no other choice but to leave. And we don't know what happened. Obviously it's a tragedy, but it's not like a vacation ruiner. You're like, man, that really sucks. But you have no idea who it is. You have no idea what happened. You're not personally connected to it. You're just like, man, that's a bummer for them. But you go on with your day. Obviously it affected us a little bit, but mind you, we're there for an entire week and it's only day 2. So eventually, after like a full day passes, it kind of starts to fade and you start to have fun again. You like forget about it. I feel guilty saying that, but everybody's done that. You see tragedy happen, and if it doesn't affect you personally, it kind of goes into the back of your mind and you just go back to your life. So we're totally back to normal at this point. We have a normal beach day, we have a great dinner, we shower up, we get changed, and that night, we decide to go out to some of the bars for a little bit to experience a little bit of the nightlife. So the bar is a really good time. We meet up with some of the other guys that are staying with us. We connect some of the cliques, and we're just talking to locals, tourists, people that heard a little bit more about what happened. And it turns out they had found a girl in her early 20s that was on vacation with a bunch of her friends in that basin. And her friends said that she left late at night, pretty drunk and pretty tipsy, but all she was doing was going and getting some pizza. And there was one thing that stuck with me, and it didn't stick with me in the way that you're gonna think it stuck with me. Remember, my mind was distorted. I was on vacation, I was at a bar, but this is what was said. They said that she rode a bike to the pizza place, but when they found her in the basin, there was no sign of the bike. I had been at the beach all day, had been drinking all day, and I was at the bar drinking a little bit more. So my head jumped to a completely different conclusion than it should have. The only dots that connected in my head were that Mikey and I had left our bikes near the beach. And now we were all the way across town at a bar, and our bikes were unattended for hours. And these weren't our bikes, they were bikes that were assigned to our rental property. So if somebody stole them or they went missing, they were gonna hit us with a very large fine. And all the guys were gonna be pissed at us. So I immediately remind Mikey, like, yo, our bicycles are all the way down the beach. We gotta go get those right now. And we were having a really good time that day. The sadness of the tragedy had faded, so much so that I didn't connect the dots that you just did. And Mikey and I are making a game out of it. We're like, oh, that's so funny. We're gonna go run and get the bikes. Let's see how fast we could do it. We're making a whole bit out of it, completely ignoring the information that we should have been connecting. So we take the main street that goes along the bay until we're at our house, and then we take the right and we take that vertical path that goes directly to the beach all the way down, because that'll lead us to the entrance where we left our bikes. And it's like 1 a.m. It's dark and quiet, and like I said, there's not as much foot traffic in these residential areas, especially at this time. It's all in the town, so it's dark and it's quiet, but we're tipsy and we're jogging, and it's not really settling into us that it's a little bit freaky where we're going. We're having a great time. We get there, the bikes are still there, no large fines, we're all good, the night is young. We hop on the bikes, we're gonna ride them back to the beach house. It's gonna take us half the time because we got wheels, and we're probably gonna go back out for a couple hours. So we're slowly riding these bicycles on this dark, narrow strip at 1 a.m. when we're closing in on one of the intersections, and we see a shadow coming out from the left of the intersection. So we start to slow down because we're on bikes. We don't want to run into people that are on foot. But once the shadow emerges, we realize that it's not a person. It's this little tiny baby deer, looking like Bambi himself. If you don't know this, Fire Island is infested with white-tailed deer. There's a couple theories about how the deer got to the island. Some people say that they're just great swimmers and they swam across the bay. Other people say that there was like a sand bridge after a major storm and a herd of them walked across, but eventually the sand bridge dispersed and they were stuck there. Both pretty good theories, but the reality is now that there are no natural predators to deer on the island, so their population absolutely flourished. And like I said, there's no hunting tags, there's no predators. These deer are living their best life. They're friendly. They'll walk straight up to you and just be like, let me get some food. But you don't touch them because they got ticks and Lyme disease. So we stop about 20 feet before this intersection because we don't want to get too close to this baby deer. We just want it to go across, mind its own business, and we continue on with our night. But after we stop our bikes and our spokes and our chains stop making sounds, we're able to hear some hooves from another deer that's definitely behind this baby or in the general area. So we know for sure we are not approaching this baby or this intersection until we see the adult deer that are coming behind it, because we're not trying to get rapid punched by like these little tiny precise hooves from a territorial protective mother deer. But as we're standing there waiting for these deer to move on, we start to hear more and more hooves. And you see, I was waiting for a big deer to come from the same direction that the baby deer came from. But as I'm hearing the clanks of the hooves on the hard ground, I realize that they're actually coming from directly in front of us. It was late, it was dark, and the lighting on these little narrow streets is terrible. So we weren't able to see what was approaching us in the direction that we were headed. But when I looked up and I was able to squint my eyes and see through the darkness of this little narrow path, I saw a herd of like 20 or 30 deer sprinting towards us, shoulder to shoulder. And none of these deers are particularly big. They're not like massive elk. They're kind of petite deers. But there was a lot of them, and they were sprinting, and they looked like they were running from something, and they were aggressive. They were taking up the entire space. There was not room for all of us, and they were headed our way, full steam ahead. So we had to make a split-second decision, like, what are you supposed to do here? We're not at the intersection yet. They're going too fast for us to get to the intersection that's behind us. We have to come up with something quick. So the first thing that comes to our head is drop the bikes and scale the little fence to our left that's like covered in branches and trees and foliage, just to get out of the main pathway so we don't get run over by this pack of deer. So we're scaling this fence, trying to make ourselves as small as we possibly can. The baby deer got freaked out and ran past us first to try to stay ahead of the herd. And then came the stampede, and it is 20 if not 30 deer slamming into the fences on the left and right, trampling each other, bashing into our shins and feet, sprinting towards the ocean side of the island. They filled the entire width of this little narrow pathway, and if we had stayed where we were, these things would have flattened us. The moment was so intense it felt like it was going on forever, but eventually, a few moments after, the entire herd had passed us, and we were able to hop off the fence and look towards the direction that they were heading. We were dead center of the island at this point, so we were able to see that like wooden bridge that went to the beach much more clear from our current position, opposed to being all the way on the other end near the bay. So we were able to see this herd of deer scurry its way all the way to the bridge and go all the way onto the beach before dispersing, and then we weren't able to see them anymore. But they went all the way to the ocean. And I want to make this very clear. We were young and we were dumb, because we started laughing hysterically. We thought it was the funniest thing that we had to scale a fence to avoid being stomped out like Mufasa. So we hop back onto the bikes, ride them back to the beach house as fast as we can to drop them off so we could head back out to the bars to tell anybody that'll listen to us what just happened to us, because we felt like it was an epic vacation story. So we text some of the guys to figure out where they're at now, because everybody bar hops there, and we go to this one particular bar that is kind of this narrow bar that the back end of it actually doesn't have a wall, and it opens up to the bay. Like you're almost like on a deck over the bay when you're at the back of this restaurant slash bar. So we get in there, we find our friends all the way at the back of this restaurant. Everybody's leaning up against the back ledge, enjoying the weather, the beautiful night sky, and we're telling this story over and over again, what we saw. We're saying that it's 50, 60 deer. We're saying that we hurdled over them. We're having a blast telling this story. People are having a blast listening to it. But eventually we just blend back into what everybody was doing before. Small talk, big laughs, people dancing silly, enjoying the music, enjoying the weather. And then from across the bar, I see one kid that isn't enjoying any of the above. This kid is right at the edge of this restaurant with his waist up against the ledge, right over the water, and he's pointing directly up into the sky, as if he's trying to get people's attention to look where he's pointing. And I instinctively look into the direction in which he is pointing, but I don't really see anything. So I look back at him to get a better gauge of the direction that he's pointing, and he looks hysterical. He looks like he's absolutely freaking out, having a horrible time. He looks like he's tearing up, like there's tears on his cheeks, and his mouth is completely agape, and he's hitting all of his friends around him, anybody that'll listen to him, trying to get anybody's attention to look in the direction that he's pointing. He looks dead serious. And obviously, I'm across the bar from this kid, so I can't hear what he's saying. Over the loud music and all of the people talking around me, I can't even gauge what he's saying whatsoever. And I also don't know the kid, so I don't know if he's doing a bit trying to make his friends laugh, like he's kind of just like doing an ugly face, pointing at something, acting hysterical just to get his friends to laugh. I don't know him. But then I look back in the direction that he's pointing, and I see the distortion again, but only slightly. And I don't know if it's my eyes playing tricks on me, because I didn't see it nearly as clearly as I saw it the other night. I saw it very briefly, like almost barely. But Mikey's off doing something else, probably telling the deer story again, and I'm not as close with everybody else, so I'm kind of isolated in this bar a little bit, looking at this kid from across the bar, and I'm the only one seeing what he's pointing at. And the only people that seem to be acknowledging him other than me are the security guards that work at this bar. But this kid is kind of frantically reaching around him, bumping people's drinks, elbowing girls. Like, you could see that the people around him are a little bit frustrated with him. So the security guards see that, they take note, and they're like, we gotta remove this kid. And I see these 3 bald, absolutely jacked security guards in tight black polos marching through the bar, beelining towards this kid. And they basically start a confrontation with this kid. And I understand from their perspective, they're the security, and this kid seems from a distance like he's acting out a bit and he's annoying the other patrons. And obviously, they don't want that, the business doesn't want that, but this kid wasn't doing a bit, and he wasn't intentionally bothering anybody, because when the security guards came up to him pretty aggressively, he was pleading with them to look. Like, he was like, no, you guys need to see this. Anybody around me needs to see this, even if they're a security guard that's upset with me. He was only focused on that. But they didn't want to hear it. They got physical with him almost immediately. They didn't care what he was pointing at. They were huge. They all grabbed a piece of his clothing, got him a couple inches off the ground, and started dragging him out of the bar immediately. And these guys were absolutely not being gentle with him. In fact, Fire Island security guards / police officers are definitely not known for being gentle and patient. The rumor has it, if they tell you to do something, you listen, because they could pretty much do whatever they want to you and there's going to be no repercussions for it. So there's an undertone of if you're in trouble with them, you better get your act straight and listen. Otherwise, there's actual physical consequences. And a lot of the security guards that work these bars are police officers during the day, and they're just getting overtime working at the bars at night. So it's like a very tight coalition of these dudes. And this particular group of these security guards, they clearly did a copious amount of steroids in their day. They were jacked, they looked like amateur bodybuilders. And this commotion, usually when somebody gets removed from the bar, everybody's like, whatever. But as they're dragging him out, this kid's fighting back a little bit. He's not a small guy, and he is freaking out about whatever he saw in the sky. So this altercation gets everybody's attention. There's a little drama going on, and everybody, especially at bars when you're out in nightlife, people attract to drama and altercations like flies to a lamp. Not to mention, the bar was actually getting close to closing, so people were leaving the bar in general. I had to go find Mikey, and I'm trying to fill him in, yo, that kid was pointing into the sky, trying to get it across to him something might be connected to what we saw the other night. But more importantly, everybody is exiting the bar to see how this altercation goes down. So we do the exact same thing. And we're expecting a funny altercation. Maybe something's gonna go down, a push and a shove. Maybe they're throw him on the ground and tell him to never come back, you're banned from the bar. It's a nice vacation town. We weren't expecting anything over the top. We were expecting light entertainment that we're all gonna laugh about the next day. But this kid is absolutely freaking out, pleading with the security guards to listen to him, pointing up at the sky, almost ignoring what they're saying, telling him to go home, and he's just looking up and pointing. And at this point, Mikey and I had fully left the bar, and we had walked all the way around the altercation to the other side of it, and we were waiting in line at the local pizza shop. 2 birds with 1 stone, watching how this altercation goes down, and still in line to get some grub. And the line for this place was completely out the door, so we were still outside in the middle of this town center. This altercation is going down literally 10 feet in front of us, and this is the first time that it's quiet enough that Mikey and I are able to really talk about what's going down here. And I very clearly communicate to Mikey in a much more serious tone, because we had been goofing around all day. I'm like, dude, he was pointing up at something in the sky, and I saw very briefly what we saw the other day. And Mikey's expression kind of dropped a little bit because he knew I was being serious. And he's like, "Are you sure you saw it?" And I'm like, "Dude, like, let's keep looking for it." He's still pointing in that direction. But as we're scanning the sky, it's just different in that town center. The light pollution is much stronger. You're not able to really see into the starry night like you're able to in the residential area. So we're not seeing anything. A few times as we're scanning the sky, we felt like we might have seen something here or there, a little distortion, a little warp, but we couldn't be sure. But what we did see clear as day was the altercation that was happening in front of us, taking a very dark turn. This kid was still pleading with this one particular security guard that had stepped ahead of the other two and was really the face of this altercation. And this kid is talking and pleading, but the security guard isn't saying a word. He was just staring into this kid's eyes with a horrible grimace on his face, like he had true malice in his heart and bad intentions. And so quickly, this situation took a terrible turn. The security guard was walking and closing the distance to this kid, so much so that this kid put both of his hands out to kind of signal to the security guard to like, keep your distance, like stay away from me. But clearly this security guard was a highly trained individual. Maybe not from the police academy, maybe it was because he was clearly a bodybuilder, he had very good control of his body, but to me it seemed like he was trained, like actually trained. Because this security guard immediately grabbed double wrist control and immediately gave this kid's hands like a little push and then a little pull matched with a snap down, so the kid's hands weren't guarding his face or able to hold the security guard at bay. He snapped them down so his hands went to his sides, completely exposing his head. And at the exact same time, he lifted his hip, he lifted his knee, and his leg came over this kid's shoulder and connected his shin to his temple. Like I'm talking shin bone to orbital bone to temple, with his foot wrapped around the back of his neck. He head kicked this kid like he was a Taekwondo champion in his youth. Not to mention the dude must have been 230 and this kid was drunk. He sent his shin across this kid's head like it was a baseball bat, and the kid went to sleep. Immediately, knees crumpled, arms behind himself, out cold, snoring. And that is not something that you do to somebody for like a petty bar altercation, especially just like a drunk kid on vacation. This was a life-changing head kick. I'm talking Leon Edwards, Kamaru Usman out cold clean. And right away, everybody that was around this altercation was in an uproar. The shin connected and everybody freaked out. We're like, why would you do that? It was so over the top, so inherently violent that even the people that were like on his team, his security guard friends, were restraining the dude as well. Like they were on the side of the crowd, removing this guy from the situation and calling in EMTs because this kid was out cold. Like there was going to be serious long-term issues from the violence that this dude brought to this petty interaction. But the look in this guy's eyes, the dude that delivered the head kick, there was no empathy in his face. It was as if he absolutely did not care that he just changed this kid's life. It's like he was detached from the entire situation. He didn't even seem to care about the social repercussions that everybody was mad at him. He was blank-faced and aggressive, like he would have kept going. Luckily, people start tending to this kid right away. The EMTs are there very quickly. He's conscious after about a minute or two, and they remove the security guard from the situation completely. And eventually the on-duty police officers came and are taking everybody's witness testimonies, and we're staying there and we're like, we saw everything. That dude is hyper violent. He probably shouldn't be a police officer. If he is, we don't really know. Everybody around is like telling the police like, that was his fault. That kid did not deserve that. And we did our best to just do our part to help this kid's situation. Maybe it'll help with a lawsuit or something like that. But we could tell that the underlying tone of this situation from the police officers is like, you tourists are going to be gone in a week. We're going to brush this under the rug. We don't care. This happens all the time. So the best thing that like Mikey and I could do is maybe report it in Long Island. But it didn't seem like there was much that could happen here. Realistically, there was probably going to be no repercussions for this. And it's not like all of the other guys that we were staying with stayed and saw this altercation. We stopped to get some food, and that's why we saw it. The other ones went to the late night bar and didn't witness any of it. So we were the only two in a house of like 15 people to be affected by this situation. And to be honest, like, it was kind of a night ruiner. Things were stacking up. We grabbed a couple of slices and we went home, and we started to feel the weight of something being wrong on this island. The feeling of vacation kind of starts to get chipped away at when a girl's found in the basin, and then you see somebody like take a life-altering blow for no reason from somebody who's supposed to be protecting the sanctity of the island. And we're just sitting around this beach house scouring our phones to see if there's any avenue in which we could get that security guard in real trouble, you know, just trying to help this kid out. Like, this stuff shouldn't happen here. Mikey finds something, and I'm like, oh dude, you found a way that we could maybe pursue this guy? Like, let me see. But he holds up his phone to me and he says, dude, do you recognize her? And at first, I definitely didn't recognize who he was showing me, but that was until he swiped to the third picture. And then I knew exactly who it was. I was able to recognize her because the third photo was a screenshot from security camera footage, and it was a girl riding her bike down one of the narrow pathways, and it was clearly the same girl that we had seen, the one singing the Krusty Krab pizza song before taking a hard left turn and hightailing it towards the ocean. And I'm trying to get context clues because this looks like a missing persons report or some type of obituary or something like that. But Mikey piles on and he's like, dude, look what her parents are saying. And I see this long, lengthy paragraph of like somebody rapid firing onto Facebook who's absolutely freaking out. Like, I'm talking the whole 9 yards, like all caps, exclamation points, question marks, spelling errors. Like, this looks like somebody in a dire situation, frantically trying to get attention or trying to get help. And I realized almost immediately that the same girl that we saw frantically riding the bike towards the ocean is the same girl that was found in the basin the next morning. But that wasn't the insane part about the situation, that we witnessed that like maybe we might be the last people to see her. That was just a scary coincidence. And we initially think like we should definitely reach out to them and tell them what we saw. The crazy part about it was the story that was told to the parents. The mom was absolutely freaking out because she was told that her daughter had gotten too drunk, probably slipped into the basin and drowned. But the parents spoke to the person that did their daughter's autopsy, and they said that there was absolutely no water in this girl's lungs, and there was no sign that she drowned. The cause of death was actually decompression sickness, which is more known as the bends. You've probably heard that from like scuba diving. Basically, if you go scuba diving and you go really deep underwater, your body slowly gets used to the pressure from being deep underwater. So you have to slowly ascend to the surface, like really slowly. Otherwise, like your veins will like literally pop because you need to slowly acclimate to there being less pressure around you. And they basically call that decompression sickness. And then everything started to fall apart about this situation because nothing added up. We saw this girl ride her bike towards the ocean side of the island, and they found this girl in the basin on the bay side of the island, completely on the other side of the island. So if they said that she drowned, she must have drowned on the ocean side, and then what? She drifted all the way around the entire island and very conveniently floated into the basin that was directly on the other side of the island. Oh, and then on top of that, let's pile on, she also was so good at swimming and holding her breath that she was able to dive down without scuba gear and get so deep that she was able to ascend too fast and die from bends instead of drowning. All of that happened within a couple hours. And then, oh yes, she magically ended up on the other side of the island in the basin, where the water's not even deep enough to get bends. Nothing about the situation made sense, so this woman that's frantically posting on Facebook, she's doing it rightfully so. There's something off about her daughter's death, and she just lost a child, and she was told a lie that didn't match up with the cause of death. Of course she's devastated, of course she's freaking out. But if you didn't have the context that we had about it, or the context that she had, if you saw these posts, she's coming off kind of crazy. And I don't blame her with everything that's going on in her life, but from the outside looking in, you'd think like, this woman's kind of lost it. But obviously she's just a grieving, frantic mother that's coming off kind of crazy. Of course she is, because she's being lied to. So we go to the comments of the post, and to be honest, it made us feel a little bit better, because initially we didn't know how to approach the situation. We didn't know if we were the only ones to see her. So are we going to be eyewitnesses to this? Like, what is happening? Selfishly, you think, like, does that make me a suspect if we were the last people to see her? Is this going to consume the next few months of my life? But luckily, the comment section was filled with other people that had seen her. I guess other people were on their decks or in their backyards, and they had also heard her singing, and they'd also seen her and seen her on security footage. So it wasn't just us. There was a ton of people that came forward and were like, no, we saw her go the other way. So it's not like we're the only ones saying it. So we felt, oh, absolutely, let's comment on this. Let's let her know that we're also a part of the group that supports her. We backed up what some of the other people were saying. We gave them our condolences, and we gave them our contact information if they needed us to speak to anybody. But it was late, we had to go to sleep eventually, and there was nothing much else we could do for her in that moment, other than wake up to the most bizarre thing that I had ever seen. We wake up the next morning and we're pretty freaked out about the entire situation. Not only because of the weird things that we were seeing, but because of how the people on the island were acting. For some reason, the people that were at the crime scene trying to help a distraught family were lying to them. And the family had to go and talk to the coroner to find out the actual cause of death, and it didn't correlate with the lies that were told to them. And on top of that, we witnessed a kid pointing at a distortion in the sky very similar to the one that we had seen with the girl that was found in the basin. And that kid was brutally removed from his consciousness by another person that was supposed to be an authority figure on the island and protect the common good. So it's not like the vibes were fantastic the next morning. And at that point, obviously a little bit of the booze and the partying were getting to a lot of the guys, so people slept in a little bit more that day because they were planning on waking up very early the next day. So we were the first people up. We made our coffee, we had a little snack, we weren't talking very much, and when we went to the front windows to look at the bay, we noticed that people were congregating again, but not near the basin, but directly in front of our house, just along the edge of the bay. So we step outside and I'm trying to get a glimpse of what these people are looking at. And I look at Mikey and he is freaking out because he has come to a conclusion that I haven't yet. So I'm like, dude, what are you seeing? Because I'm only seeing a couple things in the water, but I'm not able to put it together yet. And he looks at me and he says, dude, it's the deer. And at this point, we're pretty close to the edge of the bay, so I'm able to get a better look at what is floating in the water directly in front of our house. And I don't have to look that far because there's something floating directly in front of us, and it's a completely stiff deer floating on its side in the water as if it's like a taxidermied animal. And then all of the small black humps that are floating in the distance in the bay make sense. They're all different parts of deer floating dead in the water, and there's 20 if not 30 of them all bobbing in a general area as if they all drowned simultaneously. And the only thing that I could think of saying is, do you think they're the same ones from the stampede? And before we were interrupted, Mikey said they were going in the same direction as the girl. They were sprinting towards the ocean, and they both ended up on this side in the water. So many people are gathering now. Everybody's watching what's happening. Some people in small boats, they clearly like work on the island. Maybe they're a part of the police department. Whoever they are, they're trying to clean up this mess of 30 bobbing deer. But they can't do it fast enough because it's hard enough to drag one out of the water. There's 30 of them. And I said something interrupted us. It wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It wasn't somebody coming up and speaking to us. It was somebody screaming at all of the workers trying to clean up this mess that was in the water. And I didn't know who it was initially until I heard what she said. It was the girl's mom, the same woman that was writing those Facebook posts, was screaming at the workers, and she's saying things that she kind of comes off crazy, but she's saying things like, check their eyes, I bet there's no water in their lungs, look at me when I'm talking to you. Everything about the situation felt dirty, everything about the vacation was kind of falling apart. There wasn't any joy left in it. We're watching this mother who's grieving her child screaming right out front of our house. We didn't feel like we wanted to go to the beach and party. In fact, we kind of wanted to leave, but we decided to stay in the house. We weren't going out. We didn't want to see any of the dead deer being dragged out of the bay. We didn't want to go out at night and watch another kid get assaulted by security guards. We were over the entire situation and we were ready to bunker down in the house. And we didn't expect all of the other guys that we were staying with to be on the same wavelength as us. They didn't witness some of the things that we witnessed. We didn't share with them the Facebook post of that mother. They didn't see the kid get head kicked. They didn't see the girl sprinting towards the other side of the ocean. They weren't nearly as connected to these series of events as we were. So they weren't really bothered. They went out, they went to the bars, they went to the beach, they went to restaurants, and Mikey and I stayed at the house by ourselves, at least for the entire day. Eventually, the guys decided to bring a bunch of people back to the beach house to throw a little party. It wasn't because they were trying to bother us, it was literally just how their day went. They didn't want to be at the bars the whole day, they wanted to grill some food, and they wanted to bring everybody and have a little deck party. So we had about 8 hours to ourselves, but then everybody started trickling in, and there was a full-blown party going on the property. And we're not gonna hide in a room. We were just on the deck, being nice, being welcoming, and so much time had passed that we were just kind of a part of this party. It didn't bother us in particular. So we're just hanging out and chit-chatting. The entire deck's full. It's a good time overall. We couldn't go to sleep because everybody was being too loud. So we figured, best case scenario, let's hang out. We're not gonna party hard, but we're also not gonna be hermits. People are playing drinking games, people are laughing, chatting, eating, and Mikey and I are just being pretty quiet, talking to people if they talk to us, but kind of in the corner of the party. And right in front of me was one of Mikey's cousin's friends, because Mikey's my cousin, but he also has cousins that I'm not technically related to. And this kid is playing a drinking game directly in front of me. But I see his attention change from the table where he's flipping a cup to the sky directly in front of us, right to the same location that we saw the distortion the first night. And this time I saw exactly what he was pointing at. It was the same thing that we saw. An odd shimmer floating across the night sky in exactly the same path, exactly the same size. It was completely identical. And this time it was even a little closer. I got a better look at it. And it was obviously a solid object, but it was as if it had some type of camouflage that made light bend around it. But it was right there exactly like it was the first night. And Mikey's cousin is kind of getting hysterical, kind of like the kid at the bar that got head kicked. He's freaking out. He sees something. He doesn't like what he's seeing and he's trying to get everybody's attention to look at it. And he doesn't see that we're looking at it with him because we're behind him and we know what to look for. And as I'm looking at him pointing at this thing, from the corner of my eye, I see somebody else move in a kind of herky-jerky fashion. And I see the girl that was playing against him very abruptly pivot and walk towards the gate that leads to the stairs out to the narrow pathway. She doesn't say goodbye to anybody. She doesn't say a word. She just almost robotically opens the gate, walks down the stairs, and starts speed walking down the pathway towards the ocean on the same exact path that the girl was riding the bike the first night. A total Irish goodbye, didn't say anything to her friends, didn't say anything to anybody. And she's speed walking down this vertical narrow pathway towards the ocean like I'm having deja vu, but she doesn't have a bike. So now I'm watching this girl, but I'm still listening to what's happening in front of me with this kid that's pointing at the distortion, and I hear somebody say something to him. All I heard was, "Who invited you here?" And the statement had like a mean, angry growl to it. And when I looked up to see who said it, my mind immediately went to like, dude, you invited him here. Like, these dudes are in the same clique, like they're best friends. But this dude that is pointing in the sky isn't even paying attention to his friend. He's just trying to get his friend to look at what he's looking at. But his friend, the man that invited him here, is not looking in the direction of the distortion. He is purely, viciously angry and doesn't even hesitate to steal off him and clip his chin, sending this kid to the ground. And he did it so violently and so abruptly that it took everybody off guard. And it's not like he stopped there. It wasn't like the head kick. Everybody jumped on that guy right away. Nobody knew what happened or why he did it. And this was his best friend. And he stood over the top of him and sent follow-up shots to his friend's face as if he hated him. It took everybody a split second to understand what was going on, and then we restrained him. It was another randomly, horribly violent attack, and this kid was doing it to his best friend. And by the time the altercation was over and they were separated, because he didn't put him out cold like the head kick, it ended up being more of a scuffle. I looked back up into the sky, and the distortion was completely gone, and the girl that left the party was completely gone. And nobody noticed this girl leave. And as I was asking around to the other groups of girls that were there, nobody seemed to be there with her. She seemed to be on vacation by herself and ended up at this party. Nobody was invested in her whereabouts. They just figured that the girl didn't like where the party was going and left. And I had no idea where she went because the altercation started. I couldn't see if she went all the way to the ocean. I had no idea. So there was nothing I could do about it. I didn't even know her name. But the fight was a complete vibe ruiner. Everybody was like, we don't want to be here, especially around the kid that just throws haymakers out of nowhere at his friends. It made everybody uncomfortable and made everybody call it a night. There was no other signs of the distortion, and even when we tried to talk to the kid about it, about what he saw, he was so shaken up from the fight that he didn't really want to talk about it. Everybody went their own separate ways in the house. But we also knew that the next morning was supposed to be like the most special morning of this entire trip. It was like the one thing on the itinerary that we were all supposed to do together. And they called it sunrise hors d'oeuvres. And it was a funny bit if somebody didn't get into a fist fight the night before, but basically everybody gets up very early and everybody was supposed to bring like one special food or one special drink, and they were supposed to make a big platter of all these special items right out front of the house, on the street, on the bay, and we were all supposed to share these really tasty beverages and foods at sunrise, which basically meant we're starting to drink at sunrise and we're eating like truffle bites and special cheeses. It was just this very goofy, fun bit, but we didn't want to participate in it. That was the last straw for us. Me and Mikey were ready to leave the next morning, but this was going to be the only morning that we couldn't slip out while everybody was sleeping. We were hoping that they were going to sleep in like one of the other nights, and they weren't going to do the sunrise hors d'oeuvres. But right at the crack of dawn, the entire house woke up. Everybody was getting ready, and they were setting it up. The two friends had apologized to each other. It was water under the bridge, and the hors d'oeuvres were being served. But Mikey and I were secretly packing our luggages because the first ferry was in about an hour. So if we had to have a couple hors d'oeuvres with the guys, that would be fine. We were getting out of here. So eventually, everybody is out front of the house, and all of the drinks and all of the food is being passed around, and Mikey and I are still getting our luggage together. It's done at that point, and we're ready to go. We don't know how we're gonna approach this, and right as we're like, maybe we'll slip out the side of the house, we hear people calling in the front door. Well, we're on the second floor, so somebody's calling to us from the first floor and just yelling to us like, guys, come on. We're going to take group photos. You guys got to get out here. Just like encourage, like they wanted us to be a part of it. It wasn't a cruel or mean thing. We were just done with the vacation. But we hear like the whole group of them calling in behind the one dude who's like in the door calling up the stairs. And everybody just wants us out there. And we're like, fine, we're going to get through this, then we're going to get out of here. But something in me wanted to go look at what they were doing first. And we were on the second floor, and the second floor had these big bay windows that looked out across the Great South Bay. And you could look down at the sidewalk directly in front of us where all of the hors d'oeuvres were set up. And for some reason, I felt inclined to walk up and look out those windows. And I guess Mikey did too, because we slowly made our way all the way to the edge and looked down at the group of people that we were supposed to be celebrating and vacationing with. And initially I thought they were looking up at us and they were going to be encouraging us to join the fun, but they weren't. They were looking straight up in the sky. All of them had some food in their hands and a drink in their hand, but it was all on their sides, and their chin was tilted to the sky, and their mouth was wide open, and their eyes were streaming tears. And I was able to see slight shimmers of light on all of their faces and bodies, as if something was directly above them, distorting the sunlight. And they all had a light shake to them, as if they were completely hypnotized by whatever was floating directly above our house. They stopped calling to us, they were completely silent, and Mikey and I grabbed our luggage, sprinted out the back door, and we took the long way to the town center. We didn't take the main street 5 minutes away. We went on one of the horizontal streets as far around as we could until we finally managed to get to the dock where the ferry picks us up. And when we got there, we realized that we weren't the only ones fleeing. There was a bunch of other people leaving early, looking as paranoid as we were, not feeling comfortable talking to anybody, waiting for the first ferry off that island. We could tell that each and every one of the people leaving at the same time we were knew that something was wrong. Clearly, things had happened to everybody. Nobody seemed to be talking to each other, but everybody seemed to have an understanding that we were leaving for a reason. And then it all made sense. When we had arrived and we had seen all of those people getting off the ferry, they weren't hungover from a great week. They were trying their best to get away from something. And all of the workers on that ferry didn't understand why they were bringing new people in. The locals knew what was going on. And the worst part about the entire situation wasn't that any of the guys got hurt. Nobody went missing. They finished their vacation. They figured that we just wanted to leave early for some unknown reason. They didn't really care. It didn't affect any relationships. And they never brought up what we saw. They weren't offended that we didn't go to sunrise hors d'oeuvres. And from their perspective, they just had a great time. But after a few weeks, I saw some Facebook photos from our trip together. And I'm scrolling through them, and I finally got to this one image from the party where the two friends got into a fight at our beach house. And it was the moment that Mikey's cousin was pointing at the distortion, and I'm in the background right behind him. It's a completely candid photo of the party in general, but if you zoom in on me, I'm looking up at the distortion, and my mouth is wide open, and I have tears streaming down my face, and I look like I'm freaking out, but I had no recollection of that. Thank you to everybody that has been watching the videos. I know we have a bunch of new people that first saw the Sedona video. I hope you enjoyed this new story. I hope you tend to stick around. I hope you decide to subscribe to the channel, and I hope you decide to like this video, because if you do, you'll probably get more of them more often. I deeply appreciate your support, and I think we're going to the Superstition Mountains next. A special shout out to all of the exclusive members that really keep the channel going. Your support means more than you could ever imagine. If you have the means to support the channel as well and become an exclusive member, click join below this video. But it's totally okay if you can't. Your subscriptions are more than enough. I love you guys. I hope you enjoyed that one. It was a bit dark. We'll see you next week. And if you liked this video, I would like to personally recommend this one. I'll see you